In math class, we've been studying the customary system of measurement, and we know that one of those systems is the system of length. We've been practicing utilizing a chart so that you can answer even some challenging questions just in a snap by finding your numerical expressions that you need to convert your measurements and answering those questions. So to begin, you should have a piece of paper that is folded in half hamburger style, and I want you to pause the video and from your memory, try to create that customary system of length chart. Now that you've had an opportunity to try to create that chart, let's go ahead and make it now together, and that way you can check your chart and see how you did with creating that chart. We know that the first thing that you do in creating your charts is you list your units of measurement from least to greatest. So within the length system, there are 4 units of measurement. The smallest is inch, then foot, then yard, and then mile. So those are our 4 different units that we use in the length system of measurement. We know that when we go from inch to foot, we have to divide by 12 because of the relationship between inches and foot. When we go from feet to inch, we have to multiply by 12. The relationship between yards and feet is that there are 3 feet in a yard, and therefore that relationship is 3. And when we go from yard to mile, there are 1,760 yards in a mile. So when we go from yard to mile, we divide. When we go from miles to yards, we multiply. We have said that when we go small to large, we divide. So small to large, divide, and large to small, multiply. Large to small, multiply. So that is the chart that we should have created. We check our chart for 4 things. The first thing is that you have your units from least to greatest. The second thing is that you have your arrows going in the right direction, because that's going to make like a map for us to utilize as we solve. The next thing that you check for is that you have the correct operation symbols. When your arrow goes toward the right, you divide, because small to large divide. When your arrow goes to the left, you multiply, because large to small multiply. And the last thing you check for is that those number relationships are correctly recorded. Now that we've had an opportunity to build our customary system of length chart, let's try a question, and let's use that chart to answer our question and kind of see how it works. So within the customary system of length, we could be asked a question with any 4 of these units. When you get your question, first of all, you carefully read that question, looking for your unit words so that you know which system of measurement you are using. This question says, Susie wants to make a 3 5/10 yard long chain of paper clips. If each paper clip is an inch, how many paper clips will Susie need? The first thing that I do when I'm asked a measurement question is I scan and I look for the length that I'm given. The length that I'm given here is 3.5 or 3 5/10 yards. That's my given measurement. Now, if this were just any measurement question, it really could be from any system of measurement. Length, weight, capacity. This one I know is a length question because it has yard. So what I do to utilize my chart is first I record my given measure. My given measure here is this 3 5/10 yards. So I'm going to write 3 5/10 here. And in that way, I know that this is, let me make that a little bit clearer so that you can see that, 3 5/10 yards. This is my given measure. This is my starting point. Then I scan my question to see where I'm trying to go to. What am I trying to convert to? I see my 3 5/10 yards here, and I see that I want to take it to inches. As a critical reader, I'm scanning, I'm decoding, I'm looking for those key details. Here I see that I want to go to inch. I utilize my chart as a map and I create those expressions, what I'm going to solve to convert from yards to inches. I have to take my 3 5/10 yards. I have to multiply it by 3 because the arrows are going in this direction. I have to go here to find out how many feet that is. Then I have to take that product and I'm going to multiply it by 12 to find out how many inches I have in 3 1/2 yards. We can build a numerical expression just utilizing those details of our chart. I know I'm going to take my 3 1/2, I'm going to multiply it by 3, then I'm going to multiply that by 12, and that will tell me how many inches I will need in my paperclip chain. And since each paperclip is 1 inch, it'll tell me how many paper clips I need in total. So let's go ahead and get solving and let's try out this question. I'm going to utilize my computation skills with decimal multiplication in order to answer this question. Oh, and I forgot to tell you at this point, why don't you go ahead and pause the video again, try out the computation. After you have a minute or two to solve, we'll resume the video and check and see if our answers match. Let's resume with our computation and let's see if you have figured out how many paper clips Susie will need. As we solve this question, we see 5 times 3 gives us 15. Carry our 1. 3 times 3 is 9 plus 1 is 10. When I multiply with a decimal, at this point, I have to attend to my decimal point. So I'm going to move my decimals to see how many decimal movements I have between both factors. There's no decimal movements here. That's already a whole number. And a decimal sits at the end of a whole number already. I have one total decimal movement. So I'm going to move in one time. And with this, I know that in 3 1/2 yards, I have 10 1/2 feet. That's what I've just learned by doing this computation. But now I need to take my 10 1/2 feet. I need to multiply that by 12 to decide how many inches we have in total. So let me come over here to the side and let me take my 10 1/2 or 10 5/10 and let me multiply that by 12, keeping it nice and lined up to avoid little errors. 5 times 2 gives me 10. 2 times 0 gives me 0, plus 1 gives me 1. 2 times 1 is 2. Now I cross off my 2 and anything that I carried, I must keep my place values aligned. Therefore, I need one magic 0. Since I've crossed off one factor, or excuse me, one digit in this factor, I have to utilize one magic 0. Now I take 1 times 5, which gives me 5, 1 times 0, which gives me 0, 1 times 1, which gives me 1. I add those together, and I arrive at this as the digits of my answer. But I know this is not my final answer because this is decimal multiplication. So I have to attend to the decimal point. I have to count how many digits I have in decimals within those factors. I have one decimal place value here. I have none here because the decimal sits at the end of a whole number already. In total, that gives me one decimal movement. I go in one time in my product, and that tells me my answer of 126. So with that, I know that there are 126 inches in 3 1/2 yards. But that's really not my final answer. Let's go back to our question and let's analyze how we're going to use 126 inches to answer our actual question. Susie wants to make a 3 1/2 yard long chain of paper clips. If each paper clip is an inch, how many paper clips will Susie need? With this question, our actual answer was not about 126 inches, but it was about the paper clips. How many paper clips will Susie need? Since we know that each paper clip is an inch and we have 126 inches, Susie will need 126 paper clips. Since my question has words, my answer must have words as well. We will do an RA sentence. We will restate and give our answer. And in doing that, we can use words from the prompt in our restate. Susie will need 126. That's my actual answer. Paper clips in her chain. I've restated. I've used words from the prompt. Susie will need. I've related it back to the paper clips in the chain. And I've also given my answer of 126.